Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Field Between. I'm your host, Ahmed, joined by my lovely assistant.
And wife, Yasmin.
And I think today we can skip updates and just get right into what's been happening in the news. And then we're also talking about a movie we just watched that you've been wanting to do an episode on for a while.
A documentary, yeah, called The Feeling of Being Watched.
You got to speak up.
A documentary called The Feeling of Being Watched.
Major news. International law was a joke before. Now I'm not even sure what's worse than a joke, but obviously everyone knows by now that the U.S. just kidnapped Venezuelan president Maduro out of his home at like 3 a.m. on January 3rd. We just like woke up to that news, and you kind of you woke up before me, and you've been awake since like 3 a.m.
Yeah, I couldn't fall back asleep, partially because I was reading the news.
And then I kind of woke up at a normal time, and you were like, I was just like, how long have you been up? You're like, since 3. And then I was like, okay. And then I just started to roll over and go back to sleep, and you're like, they attacked Venezuela and kidnapped Maduro. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I feel like I said it too casually. Yeah.
You said it very casually. And then
I was reading the news for a few hours.
And then I immediately just like jolted awake and was like, what the hell's going on?
I mean, they've been gearing up for this, so I don't think it was totally shocking, but it is kind of crazy. Just like the mechanics of U.S. imperialism haven't changed, but they're just kind of more brazen and more like mask off. Like at least with the Iraq War, I'm not saying at least because it was a huge atrocity, but there was like an attempt to kind of create public buy-in, and there was like bullshit humanitarian reasons that were given. And this time it's really just like, hey, there's oil. And like we're going in the middle of the night, only like a month of ramp up.
They give like 5 different reasons, and they're all kind of just weird. And the only honest one is that there's oil.
Which
right?
They're like saying out loud, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I was saying, they abducted him at 3 a.m. The story is that we watched the Trump press conference at 11 the next morning, and the way they talk about it was just, oh my God, our military did this like incredibly sophisticated extraction operation. It went off without a hitch, and we like just did this like super surgical extraction of Maduro because we'd been working on it for months, and we planned perfectly and we executed perfectly, and U.S. weapons are the best, and U.S. Military is the best, and U.S. intelligence is the best. And I feel like it's exactly like when they went to go get Osama bin Laden, and leaks came out after the fact, just kind of how much it was kind of almost a Three Stooges through the door, like all getting stuck in the door situation, like people trying to race to be the first one to get into his compound and like find him, and them crashing a helicopter. And I'm like, I feel like Maduro probably made it easy because, like you said, they had been like kind of telegraphing this move for a while by building up forces off the coast.
And the CIA has been in the country apparently for the last month, has been monitoring him.
Yeah. And like, I think Maduro also knew that, something was going to happen at some time. And given that they had some prior notice, if they wanted to make it a harder extraction for the U.S., I feel like they could have, because Venezuela has like a capable military.
Who knows? I mean, the truth is, I feel like we are like the world's bully, like we have just like the military might. There was never a shot. And so it's just interesting how we kind of like talk about it like it's a matter of like, and even the mainstream press, though skeptical, part of their skepticism, I think, is because it's Trump doing this. I think if this was a Democratic president, there would be less pushback. But, before they kind of get into like the legal issues with this and the moral issues with this, there is still a lot of like ink written and kind of like time spent on like the New York Times and NPR podcasts about like the might of our military, and it's just money. Like it's not impressive. It's not like a moral virtue to have a military that is able to kidnap someone. Like I just don't understand like how there's been so much collective brainwashing that that is something that doesn't immediately get pushed back.
I think they're trying to use the moment to like reignite excitement about just kind of real clandestine, highly
Right, like we're in a spy
powered
movie. It definitely feels like that. But it's
shit,
like,
yeah.
what is the? There's no honor. Like it's not a fair fight. Like we are armed to the gills. We have a history of strong intervention in Latin America. There's been decades of this. Like nothing about this is like the underdog. Like it's like the guy. It's like the bully winning again. You know?
Yeah, no, it's not a fair fight, but I guess what I was saying is that if given that Maduro and like I'm sure his intelligence agencies probably knew that something like this was going to happen, if they wanted to put more guards between him and the U.S., like whoever's going after him, they certainly could have, and it could have been more of a firefight, and it could have been more of a like more explosions, more whatever, blah blah blah, and that's not what I'm seeing. All I'm seeing are the explosions were the U.S. just bombing Caracas.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, that's a fair speculation, but like, I have no idea. I don't know if he like if it was kind of the sort of thing where like, okay, if I get a trial in New York versus being killed on the spot, I'll acquiesce and go quietly. Or it could be the case that they had some informants on the inside. Who knows? I mean, the other thing too that's really upsetting about the press coverage, just to kind of your point about like seeing the imagery of
people running from the bombs.
The bombing and the U.S. shelling is like it keeps them being reported that there were no U.S. casualties. I haven't seen a single report.
I tried to look. I actually even tried to look in at Venezuelan news sources to figure out like what the death toll was, because they're like, oh, no U.S. military people killed, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck about that.
Right?
Like,
how about the civilians on the ground?
You can't bomb a capital city and not kill people or destroy infrastructure.
We're seeing zero reporting about that in U.S. media. I looked at Al Jazeera once, but it's pretty early on. I should probably look again.
But even the Venezuelan like outlets, I just didn't find any of that. And maybe it was because I was looking same day, but you'd think you would have some estimation.
Yeah.
But I wanted to spend some time on this because it's important. Obviously, we're not experts on Venezuela.
Yeah, we're definitely not going to pretend that we are.
But I think we are certainly able to comment on the media narratives, what we heard from the Trump press conference, and kind of the pretty sheer like motivations for why this is happening.
Yeah, I think we can also just comment on our experience as Americans who have grown up constantly being at war.
Yeah.
And like just a lifetime of experience of like media portrayal of the various places that we're invading.
Yeah, I don't think it's like, I mean, it is important, right? But it's not our job to be like, oh, it's good that Maduro's gone, or it's bad that Maduro's gone, or whatever. Like, I mean, I don't know. That's for Venezuelans to decide. And I hope that they are in a position to like act in a way that feels like a democratic consensus or whatever, although I highly doubt that that's going to be the future.
They're not going to be, yeah.
But anyway, so that's not really like the point. The point is that despite whether or not Maduro was a good or bad guy, the fact that we just unilaterally went in and removed a head of state without even congressional approval.
Right, without even our own internal approval. Forget about the world's approval.
Yeah. Like set aside international approval or whatever, or like a declaration of war. Congress just didn't get to weigh in on it. It was fully the executive branch that did this.
Yeah, let's just go and jump into it. I think I really appreciate the point that you brought up because like I have seen like some coverage. I'm sure there are some Venezuelans, especially those that are in diaspora here in the U.S. who really hated Maduro, and that's totally valid. And I have no interest in commenting on that. Mm-hmm. But there is no positive track record of U.S. sponsored regime change going well. Mm-hmm. There's just literally zero. We've been at it for decades. And it's also just so laughable, like that with a straight face, there are Americans who can be like, Russia shouldn't invade Ukraine and like, you know, talk about the sovereignty of other countries. And yet like, we just like unilaterally have a blank check to invade wherever we'd want in the world. The only reason that we can do that without fear of reprisal is because our military is so big and because we have so nuclear bombs. It's like, who's going to call us on it, you know? But like, someone absolutely could, like, morally speaking, using the same justification and framework, someone could be like, hey, it doesn't seem like you have a democratic governance. It seems like you have like a president that is a crook, you know, who should be held accountable in a court of law. Like conceivably that would be totally valid under this framework.
Yeah. Yeah, and anything, so the stated reasons for removing Maduro like are just so insane. Like we said, there are a couple that were stated is like, oh, Trump said in his press conference that Maduro was planning on, or he stayed past his term expiration, and so that therefore he's a bad guy. Meanwhile, for the last year, they've just kind of been talking about Trump being like, hey, a third term would be great. And then the fact that they're like, he's a drug kingpin, whatever. He's involved with like horrible international crime that affects the U.S. And I'm like, brother, there's a whole investigation going on about you being connected to like an international pedophile ring. Like, and then what was the other, like,
and some of the drug stuff, like the fentanyl stuff is not true. Like fentanyl, which is, I think that the reason that they've been saying fentanyl, or they were for a while, is because a lot of Americans see people suffering from fentanyl. We have a huge fentanyl epidemic, but it doesn't come from fucking Venezuela.
Well, the fentanyl, yeah, they were saying fentanyl a while ago, but I think actually in the press conference, they switched to being like, oh, it's cocaine.
Yeah, which maybe there's more validity to that in terms of like a source
even
location.
If it's true,
but even if it's true, right? But the fact that they like made up a drug that just factually does not come from that place and had tried to like push that for so long is crazy.
And also, how many times have we probably proliferated like other countries' markets with drugs, illicit substances,
everywhere the
weapons.
CIA goes leads to an increase in like local drug production. That's like a proven fact.
Yeah.
Like there was huge issues with drugs after our involvement in Afghanistan. Like that's been true everywhere.
Because they work with all these like drug kingpins and warlords and arm them and
and
bolster
like
their
the
production.
day after thing, there's just nothing. They're going to be a colony essentially. It sounds like it's like there's no plan for democratic elections, and Trump has said explicitly, and so has Rubio, like if they elect someone who's not favorable to the U.S., they'll be removed. So there's like no question of like local sovereignty or like local representation whatsoever.
Yeah, the sovereignty question is, I mean, some of the journalists, I don't know who was in the press pool, but they asked terrible questions after, and they're like, what's the plan for running? Who's going to be in charge, right? Because the Supreme Court of Venezuela just ruled that the vice president, I forget her name, but that she's the interim leader now. The U.S. does not seem to agree, although Trump said that he had a call with her and that she's willing to do whatever needs to be done. But I think that still remains to be settled, and that the U.S. isn't necessarily committed to abiding by what the Venezuelan Supreme Court chooses. And he's like, yeah, we'll run it. And also in the same sentence would say that we're also going to take the oil and we need to rebuild the infrastructure. And because Venezuela, they just haven't been pumping oil like they should have been. Because of U.S. sanctions. Like
he's also saying that they've like stolen oil from us. Is he talking about like nationalization, I guess?
Yeah,
like,
he's talking about the nationalization that happened under Chavez.
Yeah, but that's crazy. Like, so basically the fact that they nationalize their own resources is stealing from us.
Yeah.
We have a right to like all natural resources.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's such heightened like anti-immigrant rhetoric here. And he's really tying it together to his credit in a way that's like very smart but really awful. Like he just kind of like, yeah, like they brought their gangs here and whatever, and it's like it's all just bullshit and lies. But
I thought Tren de Aragua, that's the one he mentioned, I thought that was supposed to be the I thought that was the El Salvadorian gang.
I thought so too. Let's look. Maybe
because he kept mentioning that one. I was like, is that Venezuelan?
Oh, they are.
It's Venezuelan?
Yeah, I also thought that it was El Salvador.
All right.
Yeah. This is the other thing that we've been reflecting on, at least I have been too. Like, I know that we have such a strong history of intervention in Latin America, of military intervention. I know that there's like a lot of dictators in Latin America were like trained in the U.S. by the U.S. military. But it is embarrassing to me, given that it's like our hemisphere and so close by. I don't know any of the details. Like, I could not list out for you like the countries that I know I know like bits and pieces, but just like not history that we were ever really taught.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't. And like, yeah, I feel like now people are starting to just frantically research what the Monroe Doctrine is. And
I know the Monroe Doctrine.
yeah.
I remember that, but I don't like. I couldn't list out every country in Latin America that we have had a military influence in. Could you? Like,
I think all of them.
but probably most of them, right? Yeah, we should do like a book review
All
or
of
something.
them.
That would be helpful.
I don't think there's a single one that has Honduras, Guatemala, Panama.
Brazil? No.
I'm sure we have had something going on in Brazil, given how big it is and
I
how
just feel like that's like I feel like this event is making me feel like that's something I need to work on in terms of like learning history. Like I think that's kind of crazy. I actually would say in general Latin America is like a huge thing that I just don't know much about.
Yeah, and it also seems like this is for the US a way to really stem the tide of, or like try to dampen any sort of revival of like a Bolivarian revolution or like any sort of like pan Latin American socialism from really ever taking hold ever again. Because I think they're not really fond of Lula in Brazil, who's was made out to be kind of like a more radical or like super progressive figure in his first term. And now that he's out of prison, like, and running the country again, it's really not all that. Yeah. I feel like he's just kind of a liberal
More
guy.
center, yeah.
I'd be interested to know what Brazil's move is going to be because, you know, they share a border with Venezuela to the north, and
people are also, I know like Colombia is freaking out about like being flooded with refugees. That's another concern too. In addition to like further U.S. intervention, there's like the fallout of this. Yeah.
That and then also there were tensions between Venezuela and Guyana over some of those oil fields, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, this is like super destabilizing for all of South America. And I'm sure will only lead to just kind of increased isolation and militarization of a lot of these countries. Yeah, like the geopolitical fallout is just going to be insane, not only in this hemisphere, but now that we've just been telegraphing and like talking so much about Monroe Doctrine here, Monroe Doctrine, we're really going to flex our power and this is our hemisphere and no one can stop us from doing whatever we want. Well, there are other powers in other hemispheres who are just going to take that as a sign that, okay, well, you don't get to interfere in my backyard. And China is super interested in fully just taking over Taiwan, as people know. And the weird thing is that the U.S. just signed almost a record-breaking military arms deal with Taiwan. And just, I don't know. It depends on how China plays this. Like, this is just speculation. But if this does increase other powers' appetites to just do the same thing in their hemispheres, it very quickly just devolves into a World War III situation.
I mean, I feel like we've already been kind of
people
moving
have been saying that for a while,
in that
yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just kind of less, again, it's more mask off. It's less like pretending that there's other reasons.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar, just in case anyone is not familiar, the Monroe Doctrine was just a kind of framework by President Monroe in the 1800s that the U.S. had a right to the entire like hemisphere essentially, and that it was closed to European colonization, and that it was kind of the right of the U.S. to expand over the Americas. Yeah.
Yeah, and that there could only really be one great power in each hemisphere.
Right.
Yeah. So in the press conference, I think you and I laughed about. So, okay, Trump really mumbled. First of all, stylistically, he looked rough. He sounded rough. His sentences were short.
I think it's like Biden. I think they're propping him up with drugs. Like, I think he's barely alive.
It feels like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he's gotten to like sleepy drug stage, but I think they're just letting him kind of fall asleep and nod off. And he has just enough juice in him to read 4 words at a time. And he really struggled through some sentences. Yeah.
He's like a angry drugged guy. He has like a different reaction to it. Yeah.
Yeah. He wasn't happy. At the end, he was just like, yeah, I want to congratulate Pete and Marco. This was like a really great, and the general's name, who is, they kept calling him Raising Cane. And I was just like, what the I thought this was a chicken place. And I didn't realize his name was Raisin Cane, or maybe they just call him that. But anyway, so he was just like, congrats, Pete and Marco. This was like a great effort. Like, go US. This was like the best attack on sovereignty ever. He said something. I'm not even exaggerating. Something to that effect. He was
you
like,
and I both reacted at the same time. We were like, what?
I was just like,
I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank General Raisin Cane. He's fantastic man. I've worked with a lot of generals. I worked with some I didn't like. I worked with some I didn't respect. I worked with some that just weren't good. But this guy is fantastic. I watched last night one of the most precise attacks on sovereignty. I mean, it was an attack for justice.
And he had closed, like, as he was saying, good job, Marco and Pete, like, he had closed his folio, so he was no longer reading off of a script. You could tell he was just like, all right, what could I say here just to end this? Is like, okay, this was a really great, powerful attack on sovereignty. And you're just like, yeah, I guess so. But like, do you know what sovereignty means, or are you just like actually happy about this now? Yeah. And then, like I said, like the questions, they just really didn't answer any of the questions, and most of the questions kind of sucked.
And the main thing they didn't answer was the one reporter who had the foresight to be like, what's the plan for the day after? And just nothing.
Yeah. They're like, well, he kept saying we're just going to get the oil, right? And Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, some people may know, by a lot, and largest proven oil reserves, right? So it's like, we know it's there. It's like 100 or more years worth of oil. It's a shitload of oil. Most of the oil was like nationalized, of course, with sanctions. Venezuela is not really able to sell its oil in the global markets, which is like really hamstrung it economically. The US and other countries like to say that the economic crisis or the economic downfall of Venezuela is purely due to the fact that socialism doesn't work, and that socialism is bad. The reason you have a strong man is because you have like a destabilized country that can't grow economically, and because its industries can't flourish.
Right. And it's also like,
that's not the only reason, but that is like definitely not helping the situation.
For
and
sure.
The economic situation cannot honestly be assessed as just being
while there's
that socialism is bad.
Right. While there's a strong sanctions. Yeah.
Yeah. Chevron has some operations still there, but they seem limited. But it sounds like Chevron's going to be the company that is going to go in and really benefit. So I'm expecting Chevron stock tomorrow. I'm going to watch it because this happened over the weekend, but I'm sure at market open, it is just going to fucking skyrocket, which is such a grim thing to think about and see. And then the other weird connection, the other discourse that I've seen has just been a lot of Israel connection to this, which is strange. And a couple things I want to say on that is to rampantly speculate. Ahmed's speculation corner.
Okay, is this helpful?
Yeah, I think so. Just indulge me for a second. But I think that there are other consequences of the U.S. seizing the world's largest oil reserve. The second world's largest oil reserve is in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia's economy, although they are trying to diversify it, it's still like 40 to 50, like almost half from oil exports. So the fact that the U.S. has seized the world's largest oil reserve and seems hell-bent on just expropriating it and taking it for its own, surely is going to have reverberations for Saudi Arabia's power in the region and the Saudi Arabian economy, and also the need for the U.S. to actually like play nice or make Saudi Arabia happy to have it as a regional partner. I think that's going to drastically decrease Saudi Arabia's importance. Not that Saudi Arabia has been a friend to Palestinians, but they have been a negotiating partner with the U.S. in, mostly selling out Palestinians, but also to the minimal degree of tempering Israel's ambitions in the West Bank and also in Gaza. It's mostly that they don't want to see Israel gain power
In the
rather
region.
than see Palestinians exterminated, right?
So just to kind of flesh out, you're saying that essentially you think that potentially because we'll have oil from Venezuela, there won't be the same need to kind of barter with Saudi Arabia, and that could lead to decreased Saudi influence in the region and increased Israeli influence.
Yeah.
I think that's plausible. I think it's probably still advantageous from a U.S. standpoint to have kind of like a strongman like Saudi in your corner.
But now Saudi's a strongman. But again, like the whole point is that we don't want them to be a strongman. And in fact, we have a much closer relationship with Israel, and Israel has the greater Israel ambitions, which includes taking over parts of Egypt, more parts of Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, a lot of its neighbors, obviously. So Israel wants to grow. Honestly, I'm not sure what the extent of its ambitions is, but it seems kind of bottomless and endless. Also, still probably champing at the bit for another shot at Iran. So although I think Saudi doesn't, obviously there are tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran, I don't think Saudi Arabia wants like an all-out war with Iran. Like I think Saudi Arabia...
No, they're just doing proxy fighting back and forth. I think that's an interesting point that maybe like us having more oil could have sort of trickle-down effects for other places. Again, my instinct is just kind of that the U.S. wants to support as many like henchmen in the region as possible, like wants to have Sisi in their corner and wants to have Saudi in their corner. I think that part of what makes Saudi so dangerous is all the normalization that they do on Israel's behalf ultimately and on the U.S.'s behalf. And I think that like having that veneer of like, look, we have Arabs on board, that it would be more difficult to lose that than not.
This is Naftali Bennett, who is the former prime minister. He posted a video on Twitter, just kind of like him flipping an hourglass and saying that time is running out for Iran. So it seems like they're emboldened like this. And there's an Israeli journalist, Eddie Cohen, who kind of like talks about the Greater Israel Project.
I don't
Translated
doubt,
from,
just to be clear, I don't doubt that Israel's trying to expand or that they want to attack Iran again.
Yeah. I want to point specifically to this quote, though. It's, when Venezuela falls, the Iranian regime will fall, followed by the Qatari, Algerian, and Tunisian regimes, and then the Turkish regime. We will change the landscape of the Middle East, and then we will discipline the Saudi regime.
I think they're already succeeding with disciplining the Saudi regime, unfortunately.
I think the Saudi regime is on equal footing, just given its massive wealth, and it also has some American weapons. But again, that seems like it can change pretty quickly with the acquisition of the world's largest oil reserve. The Venezuelan vice president also made a statement about like, oh, this was like a Zionist attack, which I'm not really sure, because it kind of seemed like she left it at that, like didn't really add more detail.
No
but
explanation or follow-up.
That's kind of...
That doesn't seem very helpful.
Maybe she meant
I think
like
maybe she
spiritually
means that the
Zionist.
U.S. is like Zionist. I mean, but that's not really relevant to the situation.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but like, I mean, Netanyahu also put out a statement that was just like, we fully support the U.S. in doing this. Like, this is great for the world.
I think both the U.S. and Israel mutually support the idea of like colonial expansion of those powers. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure we'll learn more, hopefully, as the days goes on. But like, it is weird how much this actually reverberates and redounds to the benefit of Israel as well in the region. Like, I think that is pretty clear. All right. Anything else on this?
No. Yeah, it's a bummer. Not good. I hope that we see like, I don't even know like what levels of power in the U.S. have to be like, just besides mass protests, like what should be the appropriate reaction to this? Because I do feel like a lot of Trump voters could be mobilized against this. Like a lot of people really thought they were voting for a less interventionist president.
I think they like it.
You think they like it?
Yeah.
But
I mean, I've
even if
kind
it's
of been
like,
seeing like people I went to high school with, and like kind of, I just like I like to use that as a barometer for your average Trump voter.
mm-hmm.
And they're just like, yeah, it was great that a president finally fucking acts. Even though that's the thing about Trump voters, it's like they're not ideological voters. Like
they're kind of vibes voters. Yeah.
they will on 1 second just be like, yes, we're done fighting all these like forever wars and getting involved in shit we don't need to be involved in and spending lives and money and whatever. And then the next like administration, they're like, yeah, it's great that we totally like just violated a country's sovereignty and are doing all these missile strikes on behalf of Israel and kidnapping heads of states and like, yeah, just.
But I wonder if
fully
like just
colonial.
there could be kind of some telegraphing message of like, hey, you still don't have health care. The Epstein files still haven't been released, and like money is going to this.
Oh yeah,
instead.
and they hated pedophilia before, and now they love pedophilia.
Yeah.
They think it's great, and they want to be able to do it, and it should be legal.
No, you're right. There definitely are a lot of people in that camp. I bet there's some people who are swayed, but yeah.
Some, but I think your average voter is probably like, yeah, this is fine. America
I'm just
first.
excited by the like military narrative of it all. Maybe the sort of spy-like narrative.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be like video games that pop up that make it look cool, movies, more media narratives. Oh, we were at a coffee shop today and CBS was on, and they were like showing obviously footage of some Venezuelans celebrating this and diaspora Venezuelans celebrating what was happening. And they're like, this is, a lot of people are really happy about this. Maduro is a dictator and he's gone and he rigged the election. And so people are like celebrating, even though it's like an unprecedented thing. Like they always have to mention this is like somewhat crazy, but like it's really worth it. And they're like, coming up, we'll hear from a woman who left Venezuela and is now like a celebrity makeup artist, and she hates Maduro, and like she's going to talk to us about how she feels in this moment. And so they're doing, or like I guess Barry Weiss is just doing exactly what she was installed to do, which is kind of be a makeup artist for the face of fascism in the U.S.
But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of reporting of like everyday, like look at quote unquote everyday people that is essentially supposed to like justify. Because like two things can be true. There can be like, hey, this guy was a dictator. He wasn't great. A lot of people didn't like him. And that this is not the way to like have a regime change. It should come from the people. And that there were circumstances created by the U.S. that also enabled these conditions.
Whatever people's reactions are on the ground is irrelevant to the question of should the U.S. unilaterally decide that it's going to go kidnap a president.
Completely, yeah.
Especially knowing the motivations, right? It's not to be able to help the people. It's not like to install any sort of democracy, because that is like a farcical concept now. Yeah, the honest thing about Trump is that, yeah, he said all the other shit, like he kind of like front loaded it with that, but then he was just like, yo, they got a ton of oil and that's what we really want. And he was quite blatant and honest about that.
Yeah. And not like it's better necessarily, but it is interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just, I mean, I think we've already said this, but even if the idea was sincerely to create democracy or whatever, there's no track record of that working as a result of U.S. foreign policy intervention, or U.S. military intervention. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah, I guess stay tuned. So we watched a movie. You've been wanting to watch this for a while.
Called The Feeling of Being Watched, yeah.
Okay. You want to set it up?
Sure. So this is a documentary about a community, like a suburban community in Chicago that's been under surveillance for a while, and kind of the way that it affected the community. It's a Muslim American community, largely an Arab American community. It was interesting. I thought it was going to be a little bit more, it was very specific to the community, which I think was benefit from like a documentary standpoint. I thought it was going to be a little bit more of an overview of surveillance of Muslim American communities more broadly. I'm interested in learning about like the Holy Land Foundation. That wasn't really a part of the story, but yeah, it was still interesting. It started in the 1990s in terms of the surveillance of the Bridgeview Mosque. There were accusations that they were funneling money to Hamas and Hezbollah. There were a lot of Palestinian Americans, including some who were like giving money to different charities in the West Bank. And the thing that is really bullshit and frustrating is that like because there was such a microscope on this community, after like it seems like over a decade of surveillance by the FBI, including a lot of intimidation techniques and like people going into people's homes and like collecting information, they didn't find anything related to terrorism. They found like one account of tax fraud, and this is such a thing that happens like
one tax and one mail fraud.
And one what fraud?
Mail
fraud.
Yeah.
And this is really similar to me of like growing up in New York when stop and frisk was a policy, and so there would be all these like young Latino and Black men who were stopped, and occasionally someone would have weed, and it's like just as many white teenagers smoke weed, but because like the people that were being interrogated constantly by the police were only like mostly young men of color, like those were the people who were being prosecuted when weed was illegal. And so this seems like a similar thing where like there was such a huge magnifying glass in this community that like one small thing of tax fraud, which is nowhere near the charge of like terrorism, obviously,
right,
did come up. There was a pretty notable case with this community with this one man named Mohammed Salah, who the documentary maker who was part of the community referred to and said as Abu Ahmed. He was apparently the first citizen put on the terrorist watch list, which is like a really interesting precedent. And the thing that was really bizarre about his case is that so he was one of the people who went from the community. He was Palestinian. He went to Palestine. He gave aid, and he was arrested by Israeli authorities and tortured and incarcerated for a couple of years.
5 years.
5 years. And then the testimony he gave under duress and torture, including signing a document in Hebrew, which he didn't read, was then used in a U.S. court, which is bizarre that they could try using like a foreign legal system against an American citizen. I thought that was really strange and interesting.
Yeah, so to kind of take a step back, so Abu Ahmed lived above her. He was a member of the mosque, like a pretty prominent member, it sounds like, well liked in the community. They did a fundraiser at the mosque, and so he was selected to go to the West Bank to give the money from the fundraiser. The details of which, is not mentioned in this documentary, but it's just like you're going to the West Bank. Hamas is not in the West Bank. Whatever. I'm not really sure. Anyway, so yes, he is also a naturalized American citizen, which is important to mention. And Israel just detains this man and imprisons him and tortures him for 5 years, collects all these documents and statements and whatever. He's probably not sure what he's signing and is doing so under duress, even if he is. And then Israel extradites him to the U.S. and then hands over all that documentation to the FBI so the FBI can use it in its case against him, which ended up being dismissed.
Yeah, but it was dismissed like after he had been branded as a terrorist.
Yeah,
and so
sure.
like it totally sunk his reputation, his ability to like make a livelihood. Like, yeah.
I actually made a note because I was just like the idea that someone who is carrying some money to go to the West Bank and like donate it to Palestinians being funding terrorism is, again, like just not that it matters in this world, and like especially when it comes to Israel, because Israel is a special little nation. It gets to do whatever the fuck it wants. So like hypocrisy doesn't matter. But last episode, I made a statement to the effect of like, oh, there you have all these Zionist trolls, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of were like, it's not all of them are, right? And I kind of like, I have been thinking about that. And I'm like, of course, yeah, like not all of them are. But there are a lot of them who do these auctions of like, oh, there's this land in the West Bank and there's this, we want to settle this land in Gaza. And they do auctions on land that has been or to be like ethnically cleansed. And they send money to these settlers in the West Bank who with weapons go and like evict people, burn people's farms, burn like olive tree groves. They do terrorism. And there is just like no investigation of any of this stuff at all. And it's like not deemed as like funding terrorism. It's in fact, like if people go protest these things happening, there are police outside of them to like make sure that the event can happen without disturbance. It's just disgusting. Like it's just like sheer like I don't even know what you call it, but
I feel like
hypocrisy is not strong enough of a word.
I feel like we've both been pretty much on the same page with that. Like also the hypocrisy of like saying that you want to outlaw groups like CARE, but not groups like the ADL. Like, yeah, there's a huge double standard. That's outrageous.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also what this documentary really illustrated is that like Palestinian Americans were considered guilty by default. Like very specifically, she talks about the one FBI agent who was assigned to the case. And he just seemed to have this kind of conception that like first of all, Hamas was the government of Gaza. But second of all, he had this idea that like all Palestinians were like automatically not just like tangentially connected, but like members of Hamas.
Are you talking about Bob?
Yeah.
Okay. So the guy who started
the
project. Yeah. So the investigation code name for the FBI was called...
it was called Vulgar Betrayal, which is bizarre.
And it was started by Robert Wright in 97.
I forget the exact time, but I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think something else that's brought up for me too is just like how much the FBI historically, and thankfully they did go into this in the documentary, which was really great. Like this has kind of been a big function of the FBI historically, has been to kind of sow seeds of doubt and like paranoia in basically communities of color, and often communities of color, specifically religious communities.
Yeah. So this was the other angle to the documentary is that, they had that Foucault quote about the panopticon at the beginning, and the constant feeling of being watched is as effective as being watched, or something to that effect, right? So you kind of like internalize the government gaze, and so there's a lot of in the documentary like staring out of windows and opening the blinds and closing the blinds and closing.
It was a little heavy-handed in
and
parts.
and you being like, what's this car outside? And so people just kind of like living with having normalized the feeling of just like, oh well, that's probably like an FBI agent, that's probably whatever. Or like, they all talk about how a lot of them get visits from agents who are just asking questions. The thing that I thought was crazy, that event or whatever, they were like, people were at Tarawih, and then they were saying, like, the police were saying that there was just an armed robbery or something, where people were running around with assault rifles, and so they locked down the masjid, they wouldn't let anyone out. And then you had all these like SWAT cars and like heavy military,
like a ton
police,
of military,
helicopter, and all this stuff.
But no ambulances,
rampaging
no
through the neighborhood. Yeah. And so she points out, she's like, okay, so you said there were armed criminals running around the neighborhood with assault rifles. You have all these police here, you have this helicopter here, but you don't have like a ambulance, nearby in case someone gets hurt. But anyway, so like they finally let people out of the masjid, and then the next day people were obviously asking questions about it, and they're like, oh, there wasn't like an armed robbery, this was like a exercise training thing. And it's like, why would you do an exercise training thing like right here during Tarawih? Like, what is your goal of that? And they just like didn't state anything. And yeah, it does seem like there are a lot of things that the government or agents did to make that community feel like they're being surveilled. And
I think it seems like, yeah, exactly. Like it was intentional to make them paranoid and kind of turn against each other and be nervous to like, and I mean, this does seem somewhat, it's both exceptional and it's not. I think what's exceptional is like, it's a relatively small community, it seems like, and just like the percentage of people that have had an agent go to their house because there was this one more high profile case, I guess. They kind of just like registered the whole community as a threat. But a lot of Muslim American communities were surveilled like post 9/11 in ways that were kind of outrageous, and it was kind of an open secret. And it does kind of raise questions or make you think about like how much that is still happening. I'm sure it is to a certain extent.
Yeah. I think, just on the effect of, this panopticon that they've created and that she talks about in the documentary is that people feel a lot more isolated. In her approach is we need to actually be louder and we need to talk about stuff and we need to like try to get as much information as possible from each other and also from the government.
And then also they need to create a paper trail. They need to like report every time someone comes to their house, and they need to like not let them in and do more like community training.
Yeah. And it shows like she tries to go and do these interviews and talk to people, and a lot of people just aren't willing to talk, or and definitely not willing to be on record because they just have this paranoia. And a lot of them are immigrants, and they have obviously the same paranoia and fears from having been in their home countries, especially if they're like, immigrants from Algeria and Egypt and like a lot of places where, you may, have been in some danger depending on who you are. And there's like state police that surveil you and can kidnap you with ease. And it's just like, it's kind of like no different here.
Yeah. I mean, there definitely seems to be a lot more overlap than one would hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was also interesting how she kind of captured some of the intra-community tensions with people who like wanted to be essentially, I guess, a little bit more accommodating of law enforcement versus those who were more suspicious. And I think that's like a real tension that does exist in a lot of communities in terms of like, just different approaches, frankly. And, what people's motivations are for that, I think is an open question. Maybe some people just are afraid.
Yep.
I wanted to say that just like, again, like the history of the FBI more generally shows up a lot like in my research and work. And so it's just interesting to see it in a more contemporary example. 2 of the 3 groups that I look at were extensively surveilled by the FBI. And you can see in real time the kind of paranoia it creates and the way that it breaks these groups apart, especially when you have informants involved, because people just get like, they don't know who to trust. It's remarkably effective in terms of like breaking down communities.
Yeah. It gets like a little kind of diaspora poetry-ish.
I saw you cringing during
the
that
middle
part.
And then the climax is that she's been trying to get information on this program started by Robert Wright this whole time, and then the climax is that her mom calls her and is like, hey, this guy named Bob came and said, is your daughter making a documentary? And let her know that I stopped by or whatever. And
which is so creepy.
It's very creepy. And so she ends up calling the number that was given to her mom. And I will say the guy sounded like a fucking freak.
Yeah, he did. He sounded like he's obsessed with these people.
He really sounded like he was almost like kind of gloating. She only recorded him for a couple seconds until he was like, don't record me. And then I guess being a journalist, she just didn't. But I would have. She says that he's kind of gloating. He's like, well, I knew that it was your mom, and I recognized her as soon as she opened the door, and I knew a lot of the people in the neighborhood. I just kind of Googled your address, and he's just like talking very casually and like this almost like too put on of a way to just be like, he's like, I'm so comfortable and I've got nothing to worry about, and like you should just be so afraid because this is nothing to me.
Yeah.
Sort of.
It shows the intimacy of this kind of stuff too. It reminded me of that movie I really love, The Lives of Others, which we've seen together, which is about like the secret police, the Stasi in East Germany. And it's like, right, on the one hand, you do have these kind of faceless bureaucracies, you have all this paperwork, but then you also have an actual person who is fucking spying on your entire neighborhood and like knows everyone. Like it is very intimate in a way that's very kind of surreal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to comment because one of the first things you see in the documentary is women. And being a Muslim man, I feel compelled to comment on their bodies and what they're wearing at the masjid and otherwise.
What?
What
are you talking about?
No, I don't know.
Oh.
I don't have anything else to say about this documentary, but what do you got?
One other thing I wanted to say, just in terms of like the sort of sadness of the paranoia that it creates with people. She had a really heartbreaking anecdote about one of her friends who was talking about people watching her and following her. And this is when she was a teenager in high school. And because they just grew up in this environment where they knew that like a lot of their people were being surveilled and that there were like literally cars around their schools and their mosque and that kind of thing, they were just like, oh my gosh, that's scary. I'm sorry. And it turned out this friend was schizophrenic. And it was like super depressing that she didn't that none of them realized that, because the paranoia was so like normalized for them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also a really destabilizing thing, is for people to not know when they're like, when they're being paranoid, or when there's actually something that's, happening. Yeah.
Yeah, that is sad. Okay.
That's all I got.
Great. All right. Well, I guess Happy New Year, everyone. Looks like it's going to be another fucking shit show. But
Oh, I have a happy note to end on if we want.
what is it?
I was just going to talk about Mamdani's Qurans that he was sworn in on, because I thought that was really sweet.
Oh, yeah. He was sworn in
He was, yeah.
on the Quran. I saw what appeared to be a white boy, non-Muslim, saying that his swearing in just was not according to the Sunnah, because he had his left hand on the Quran.
Okay, white boy, thank you for looking out.
And I'm like, I think in the
In the
US
prophets-
you have to raise your right hand
Oh, do
to
you?
swear.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
In the prophet's time, I don't know if there was a mayor of New York City that was.
yeah.
But I was just gonna say, one thing that was really cool and lovely to see is, so he had 3 Qurans in total. One of them,
3.
yeah. So 2 of them are from grandparents, which was lovely, and one of them he picked out in consultation with Hiba Abid, I think her name is, who is the head of New York Public Library's Middle East and Islamic Studies collection, and she's been doing such a killer job with like public education, and it's just so cool that she was consulted for this, and that they actually like took it seriously as an opportunity to kind of educate the public and like just clue them into like the city's history. So the 3rd Quran was from the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, which is part of the New York Public Library, which is where I'll be doing my fellowship in February, March, April. And specifically, it was Arturo Schomburg, who lived from 1874 to 1938. His personal kind of archives and collection formed the beginning of the New York Public Libraries, of that collection.
Yeah.
And it was just his personal Quran that he had, because he was an educated, cool guy. I don't think he was Muslim, but it was just his Quran.
Yeah.
I thought that was really lovely to draw attention to the fact that like, just like people who were considered well-read and like educated in that time period might own a Quran. And it's a Quran that is not that embellished. That's kind of like for the everyday person, which is also really sweet.
Yeah, it's cute.
Yeah, very cute.
Was there anything else about that? He did it in a secret underground subway station, which was kind of weird, honestly.
No,
People are like, oh, this is great that he's doing it in the subway station. I'm like, this is Ninja Turtle shit.
Yeah, it is
What
kind of
the
Ninja
fuck?
Turtle. You're right.
I don't like that. That's like kind of where Shredder and Master Splinter, whatever.
My friend, my best friend loves Ninja Turtles, but I'm not well acquainted, but I do know that they hang out on the subway station. She mentioned that a lot when she visited me.
He should do it in Central Park. Like, why not?
so
Why
he did-
this like fucking shut down subway station?
Well, 'cause I think
this
he-
gremlin.
He did one at midnight, and then he did a ceremonial one the next day. But the one at midnight in the subway station was a kind of like bear witness to the fact that like this is a city that can do great things and build big infrastructure, and to kind of bring back that spirit. It's also just a really beautiful.
Should have done it at the Freedom Tower.
Yeah,
That would have driven people nuts.
that would have gone super well.
Oh
I'm
my
sure.
God. Why? That's such a missed opportunity. Yo, that would have been just
I
stunting.
can't think of anything that would have been more gotten more
I
people
would have done
riled
it
up.
at the top of the Freedom Tower.
Oh God,
Jeez.
yikes!
He needs people like me in his advisory council, because
He
that
does.
you go underground. That's so.
Get tall.
That's where like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
That's where the mice are.
Maybe it was a.
Astaghfirullah. Cut that.
Okay,
You better
I'll
cut
cut
that. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.